Hi, welcome to Talk About here on Shaw TV North Island. My name is John Twigg. Thanks for tuning in. We've got another good show today. Lots to talk about. We'll get right to it with Tom Longridge, Superintendent of School District 72. Tom, thank you. And Susan Wilson, the Chair of School District 72. Thank you both for coming in.
Our pleasure.
Yeah. Good to meet you, John.
Well, you guys are in the news. I've been trying to get these folks on for about a year, and things happened. And so, we didn't plan this, but today's Mirror has them on the front page. And yes, the previous Friday paper, Tom's got his picture on the front page. So, what's that all about?
Exciting things are happening in our district.
Yeah. Well, okay, I sort of know the answer to the question a bit, but why are you targeting Oyster River for closure? And I know from all of the clippings that it's not the only one. You were looking at a few others and you've closed a few in the past, but what's going on?
Well, could we back up a little bit
Sure.
and just talk about the facility plan?
Okay.
That would provide a context for everybody
Yep.
to have a better understanding. The facility plan is something that needs to be conducted every 10 years in each school district.
That's under the School Act?
It is. And so we were not only due, we were slightly overdue. And the process was begun about 2.5 years ago, I'd say.
Yeah.
Sure.
And then there was an election and a transition with the board, so it took a little while before we were able to pick up the process. And the facility plan looks at the ages of the schools, the conditions of the schools, the repairs that need to be done.
Yeah. I got a little clipping here that says you spend $50,000 a year on roofing.
Well, there's a lot of schools in
And
this
that's a
district.
small item.
I would
Yes.
actually say it's more like 500,000 a year.
Oh my,
Yeah, 19 schools at this point.
wow.
Yeah.
And so the
And
facility
that's-
plan's trying to get down to what, 17 or?
Not necessarily. It isn't a specific number. It's more of a general philosophy and looking at how the financial resources can best be spent on student learning,
Right.
as opposed to maintaining more buildings that we really
Yeah.
can justify.
Now, I heard something about the province has a new policy where they won't give money for new capital for new schools, and specifically in our case, you're talking, I think, about merging Timberline and Carey High. But in order to get some of that money, do you have to close some schools or raise the percentage occupancy? How's that work?
I think as accommodation, it's not a new policy, John. It's
Yeah.
how they do their own capital planning, and
Yeah.
what they look at is the available space throughout any given district,
Right.
and the percentage of use both within buildings and how close they are to other schools, and how that population can be distributed within a particular school district.
Right.
Given the overall provincial needs, and you see that some districts are growing significantly,
Sure.
while others are actually reducing in population, as we have done.
Yeah.
Over the last number of years, we've went from 8,500 students to now about 5,200 students.
Yeah, but you're up from the previous year just a bit.
Very slightly, about I would say 100 students than predicted, but
Yeah.
probably 50 students overall.
Yeah.
But if we looked, as we assessed the strategic plan, our actual overall space was significant in comparison to the number of buildings we have, and that's not necessarily evenly distributed, or that space evenly distributed
Yes.
among all our schools. In fact, we have some schools that have significantly vacant space.
Yes.
One
Which
of the
ones, by the
schools
way?
you mentioned, the ones, both Discovery Passage and Oyster River have significant amount of space.
Yeah.
Oyster River, for instance, I believe it had over 168 kids. It now has, in the count when we did the report, there was 70. I believe there's 64 now. So more than half of the usable classroom space is vacant.
And the school on Evergreen, the blue building, that was closed years ago, I
That
guess.
was closed a number of years
Yeah.
ago, and the board has yet to make a decision in regard to what that space or what that property can be used for or disposed of.
Yeah.
So space
Tough choices.
is a very tough choice. In not only in regard to student resources, we won't, the government will not fund any new projects or any major repairs beyond what they give us for our facilities plan allotment, and I'll go to that in a minute, unless we've taken care of available space. If you need another school, for instance, they won't build one, they'll say, well, you have space in these other buildings, you should fill those up first.
Yeah.
So we do have some buildings that are over capacity, but in order, and they are not in very good shape.
Is that Carey High?
I would say Cedar, for instance, as an elementary school. Carey High, as you know, is 50 years old, but apart from some seismic work that was done on it, the building is, and Carey High is showing its age. Cedar needs a tremendous amount of work, but we will not be able to look at doing major reconstruction there unless we've taken care of the space that we have in other locations.
No, that's elementary versus, is there an elementary versus secondary?
There isn't, and there's
maybe
also, you can, more than
I'll
happy
phone my
to,
friend Christy.
you can certainly phone whoever you wish. Also, overall location is not a major factor. So you can have a school anywhere in the district, and it's counted, and that available space is considered available space for you to reorganize your district in order to fill those spaces.
Yeah.
We're not in a position where we can fill those spaces. We're given $1 million, just over $1 million a year, some of it which is tagged to go back to the government for major projects that they're doing provincially that we have to contribute to, like the Next Generation Network, for instance.
Yeah, if we get time, I want to get to this new internet, and Christy's going to teach the kids how to do coding.
And those are different aspects, but
Well,
I imagine
require money for computers.
they're connected, yeah. So although we're given, it seems like a lot of money, $1 million, but as going back to your roof, that was the example of one roof was $500,000, and that's in a relatively smaller school building. A roof can cost anywhere between that amount to actually $3 million over time, depending on the size of and the complexity of the building.
Yeah.
So we have very limited resources to renew and particularly rebuild our schools in the district. And your ability to do that when all your resources are spread over a number of buildings that are partial or significantly empty, we will have very little support from the ministry in order to maintain, never mind renew, our buildings at a standard that we feel is adequate for our student population.
If you sell a piece of real estate, can you keep the money and apply it?
Every piece of real estate has a different background and history, and so depending on what has been happening in the past few decades, it influences the outcome of it. I don't think that we would make a large sum of money on any of the properties that may be considered.
It seems easy when you look at it, but it's more complex because if it's deeded land, it goes back from Crown. It goes back to Crown, and sometimes there's codicils on the land of which we have to deal with, and how that land was obtained. If we bought the land ourselves, we do have the ability to retain 25% of the money, and 75% goes back to the ministry. Although we do have the ability to apply to the ministry to get the rest back and other support, but again, they will be looking at how have you looked at the property that you have and how is that being used, and what capacity do you have within other buildings. So again, you're back to that same discussion.
Just from talking for these few minutes, I'm getting a mental picture of, you guys have got a very difficult job in the sense that, you have to be business operators. You're the largest employer in town. You also have to be bureaucrats dealing with the government. And then, of course, by the way, you're educators.
And that's what we try to keep as our primary focus. And that's what we try to keep the resources we have focused on, as I said, in regard to the education first is what the board has looked at and tried to make sure, regardless of all the other elements, we're looking after and making that be sustainable over time.
Susan, why did you do this, and what's your background, and are you going to run a game after all this?
Well, my background is teaching. My mother was a teacher, I became a teacher, and I actually taught in the Campbell River School District for almost 20 years.
Oh my.
Yes, and most of it was spent as counselor at Phoenix. So that gave me a bit of a different understanding of how the district worked, and so when the opportunity to run for trustee came up, it felt like a very natural fit.
Did you know what you were getting in for?
No.
It's a very question.
It's a very steep learning curve. There are so many elements to consider, and it takes a lot to understand all the various implications and then pull them together, as you said, and deal with all of this, plus the new information and new expectations that come out frequently.
Yeah. Do you have political connections? You can phone and say, hey.
I do not.
No. Do you have bureaucrat connections you can phone?
I think you always look for whatever resources you can find, but as you know, we get financed at a very specific amount, both provincially and locally. We get our portion. And very long time ago, boards lost the ability to tax. So we work within a fixed envelope determined by the Ministry of Education, which of course is flow through from Treasury, and we have to, and the board is compelled to each year provide a balanced budget, regardless of the resources they're given, which is a challenging task.
Actually, let's look at that for a bit, your finances, because I've got a headline here about the rainy day fund, and I do my clippings, but I'm not up on it all. What's the finances like?
Challenging.
Yeah.
Very challenging. Every year the budget is less, and there are more expectations for us to cover items that have not been funded before from the district.
New curriculum, fewer students, still adds up.
Well, and it's the new curriculum implementation, at least we did receive 2 days of classroom release for teachers to be trained in that, so that was a positive step. But there are many other areas that we have been informed that we will be implementing this or required to do that with no funding.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I can easily fill up an hour, but is there some things you guys want to say? The messages you want to? I mean, I appreciate you coming in.
Sure. No, and we appreciate the opportunity to talk with people, because a lot of people, their main experience with school has been their own personal experience, and things have changed in the system since many people have been in the classroom themselves. And I think communicating to the community is one of the most important things we can do to help them feel more involved with how things are changing in the classroom. And just to encourage people to, if they don't understand things, to ask the classroom teacher, to phone the school board, to read the newspaper, to watch shows like this, and try to stay informed as to what is happening, what the implications are locally.
Yeah. Tom, you were here for 10 years, you went away to West Van, and you've been back for another 7. How long are you going to be here? And, when does the stress become sort of like, who needs it?
Well, I think I've been really lucky. I think I've been blessed in the work that I do, to be honest. I know that these challenges, and we have to meet them. I feel the kids in Campbell River are really well served. I'm actually excited about the changes in regard to the curriculum implementation piece.
Can you elaborate on that?
Well, I think the kids first direction that things are going in, the engaging students in their learning, the personalization, the diversification, and looking at the big ideas and not just knowledge and content, because certainly technology has changed how we acquire knowledge. It's what you're able to do with it. It's how you're able to think.
So how does Kids First work? Like, some kids are adept at computers and others are wanting to go sports, or?
Well, it's really taking kids from where they are and building on their capacity and actually getting them ready for where they want to go in life. And I think it certainly doesn't throw out all the basic expectations of literacy and numeracy, math and reading and writing are still paramount in order to build that capacity. But also, over the years, they've noticed they've lost the level of engagement with some of the students. So we're looking for ways to get that back.
I think I got a cell phone. I got an email. Can we stop for a sec?
Certainly.
That's a joke.
Yeah, I know.
But I
it's
mean,
very true.
I sympathize
It's
with
very
the
true.
teachers, you
Yes.
know?
Yeah.
Yes.
So looking for ways to engage our students and actually look at the world that they're going to be a part of, because there's jobs they're going to be in that don't exist, just like there is now that didn't exist before.
Yeah.
So you have to really look at how kids acquire the ability to learn, and learn not only independently, but how to access knowledge and how to actually think critically. So I think that piece is good. The challenges that we have are both situational and global. And I think we have to, part of what we just talked about earlier, we don't want it to get in the way, and we're trying to deal with that as best we can.
I know you've got some work experience, and the North Island College is also sort of gearing up on the work experience. Should there be more? Is there enough? Or it's already good? There's other issues? Where does work experience for students fit in?
It's a wonderful opportunity, and we really encourage and support as many students to try different things as possible.
Like coming here to the studio,
Absolutely.
That's right.
Absolutely.
We have a lot of partnerships, and we're very fortunate in town where kids can get access to everything from doctor's offices to Sealand Aviation to connected to the ACIP program, learning skills in carpentry and getting work experience in
food
that.
stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
To definitely in foods and food preparation. In fact, one of our Carey High has its own food and chef training. So, and we connect and we do some dual credit with North Island College as well, so that kids actually get college credits as they're attending high school.
Wow.
So that's all connected to that, getting kids ready for whatever the next phase is into their life. And I would include even transitioning of students with disabilities and challenges to be able to give them opportunities and real life working opportunities, and we do that as well within the community.
Okay, here's a curveball question. This is Kids First. What is putting some Oyster River kids on a school bus for 40 minutes twice a day, 30 minutes maybe? My son used to, I was down at Oyster Bay, and he used to take the school bus, so I know it's not always a pleasant thing. It's not the ideal. And then the kids at Oyster River are another 10 further minutes away. So there's 64 of them. Are you going to be busing 64 kids? Is that good for their learning?
Right now, if you look at that geographical area and the population of students that attend that school, that it's whether there's actually more than half of that school population that live closer to Ocean Grove School. So there's 10.5 kilometers between the two schools.
Okay.
So
You've measured it.
I'm not sure that 40 minutes each
Yeah.
way characterizes
I guess I'm
that.
thinking Southgate, but that's a different
Southgate
issue.
would be a different going
Yeah.
to high school,
Yeah.
but that
Okay.
happens actually now.
Okay, so
And
I
carry-
revised my
and-
question
yeah.
slightly.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
we do have currently students that are bused to Oyster River
Okay.
from north of Oyster River. So that would be, some of that population would be reversed, but actually
Right.
some of the population we're still willing to transport because we're trying not to have anybody feel any negative consequences around
Yeah.
access to the school.
Yeah.
And we're going to be looking at, should the board
Yeah.
determine to close Oyster River, that we'd be looking at that transportation piece very closely to have
Yeah.
kids on the bus a minimum amount of time as possible.
Yeah, so the decision's not pre-made yet.
No.
Oh, no, that won't be, the board, those are based on our recommendations. The board is going through a very comprehensive process around public consultation
Yeah.
that includes 2 public meetings for each school. One we've already had, 3 public board meetings, one of which was yesterday evening.
What came out of that?
Basically, we just provided an update to the public and reiterated what had happened, what was going to happen to the information that had been brought forward at those 2 meetings, and then what the process was going ahead.
Yeah,
Yeah. We didn't get into any great in-depth conversation.
yeah,
So, in order to finish with the transportation piece,
Sure.
it might be different kids that are riding the bus than are riding the bus now. And there may be even a few more if students choose to ride the bus that are actually physically closer to Ocean Grove than to Oyster River. But I don't believe it's going to be to the same degree as
Yeah.
you've articulated.
okay. Yeah, I don't live there anymore, so, but I still care a bit. So we kind of dealt with the curriculum, but there was something about a calendar change. Why does the new curriculum change the calendar?
That's where the implementation comes in, and that's where the training comes in for the implementation. And so the government has funded the training time for the teachers.
Oh, so it's just 2 days. It's
That's
not
right.
like, okay. What about year-round schooling? Is that on the radar here?
It's something that comes up every once in a while and is discussed. There are possible advantages and probable disadvantages.
Yeah.
And so far, every time it's come up, the disadvantages have outweighed the advantages.
Yeah. How about putting childcare spaces in underutilized schools, for example, Oyster River?
There are some childcare spaces in schools already. The problem is anything that was that would go into a school would have to pay a fairly hefty fee, a rental, and it still wouldn't cover the costs that are involved with maintaining the school or repairing the school.
There's a challenge to that because even though it's encouraged, it's not financed.
Right.
And the second challenge to any other public use of the school for other purposes, which we try to do as much as possible, we can't subsidize. So there's that
Yeah.
piece.
Yeah.
But the other piece is any space that is used, even if we rent it for another purpose, the ministry doesn't say that's allocated space. They say that that's
yeah.
usable classroom space.
Yeah.
So they would say if you need space
Yeah.
because you're requesting a new school, but you have all these spaces, then you have
Yeah.
to ask your tenants to leave and then fill that space.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, it's encouraged. On the other hand,
There's
it becomes a
Structural disincentives.
yes, and,
Yeah.
and a cost to
Yeah.
the district.
Yeah.
And unfortunately,
And then the lawyers come in too with
Yeah.
liability insurance.
well, exactly, and even all our property, if anything happens on that property, and
Right.
we're renting that property,
Yeah.
the school board is liable
Actually,
for them.
do you have a budget figure in your head for your legal costs?
In what regard?
Well, SD 72 retains a lawyer, and then they have to go and use them. I bet you it's not less than $100,000 a year.
I'd have to be honest, I would
Okay,
be.
so it's not
I
top of
would
mind
be-
either then?
No, it's
No.
not top
Okay.
of mind. I mean,
Yeah.
every organization, we have a $51 million dollar budget, and we have 750 employees.
Yeah.
And
Biggest employer in town.
right currently, I believe so. Yeah.
Another sort of awkward question. I don't blame you if you don't want to answer it. Do we suffer because we're an NDP riding?
Awkward.
I honestly couldn't determine.
I don't think we are receiving any different treatment
Okay.
because of that.
We're mainly, I think, we suffer because of the economics of the situation we live in currently, and that we're not a growing district.
We lost the mill. There's fewer kids.
Exactly. Yeah,
We're
and I
doing our
think
best
the
to cope.
significant loss that's now, as you said, we're starting to grow slightly. We're not predicted to grow significantly over the next 10 years.
Okay, we're just about out of time, but I really should squeeze this one in too. The future of Kerry High, or merging the two high schools. Can we evict North Island College from Timberline and put all the kids in, or?
That's not part of the discussion, and I know that North Island College is going through their own process of evaluation. Any decision that we will be looking at in the future will be to try to improve the program selection that we can offer. The way it is now with the two smaller high school populations, we have students who have to travel to the other campus in order to take specialty courses. Physics, I think Physics 12 is one example that is not always able to be offered at both campuses.
You got a great computer teacher at Timberline, Dave Code?
Dave is retired,
Oh.
but we actually have another fabulous computer teacher at the moment that's also teaching philosophy, and he's also teaching coding, which is what you. Mr. Code is since retired, and he was an exceptional teacher that brought a lot to the
He meant
community.
a lot to my son, and thank you guys for having him. Yeah, I got the signal. We got to wrap up. So thank you, Susan, and thank you, Tom.
Thanks
My
for the
pleasure.
opportunity.
Yeah, it flew by, didn't it?
A lot to talk about.
But anyway, thanks for coming in. Well, there's Talk About, folks, on Shaw TV North Island. If you want to view it again, it is posted on a YouTube channel. So thank you, Laura. Thank you, Valerie. Thank you, Chaz and Gord. And thank you for watching.